Hey guys, Rob Red here. I've had some questions over the years about my setup in the Land Cruiser in terms of gadgets and whatnot, and it's evolved. As most of you know who've watched my videos or have seen me on the forums know that I've run an iPad in a vehicle since it first came out back in 2010. Excuse me, I actually had one that was mounted in my Audi original iPad 1 back in May of 2010. So I wanted to give you kind of a quick take a look at what's in the dash here. I think it's somewhat unique in a few ways, just kind of the way I've configured it, really for solo, but also for dual passenger use. What you're looking at right now is an iPad mini on the left side there that's mounted where the factory stereo would normally live. And you are seeing a Icom ID-5100 ham radio head on the bottom right, and on the top right is a Yeasu FTM-350. Now, why would I run two radios? Well, I'll get into that in just a minute, but each of them have some unique capabilities, and when I'm managing a road trip, when I'm leading a group, it just gives me extra capability and added functionality that helps me manage that, and I'll talk more about that in a second. So I want to pan down here a little bit just to show you real quick some switches I've added. So normally you'd recognize this area as you might have a pocket in there if you've got a earlier Land Cruiser, or you may have your automatic height control, suspension controls in there if you've got an LX or a later model 100 series Land Cruiser. In my case, I had the blank panel there. I didn't even have the pocket, but I thought it was an ideal place to drill some holes and mount some switches, which you can see I've done. So for my system here, I've got three switches laid out. The first switch right here activates my rear amber marker light. I've got a rigid dually mounted to my swing out in the back with a amber lens cover on it, which is great for dust and desert and low visibility situations. Helps you get spotted by people behind you so they're not rear-ending you. The second switch here activates a relay that engages the charging. I have USB charging down below, and you can see the green light on right there with the switch activated. When I turn the switch off, you can see it dies. So this is great for key out charging of our USB devices like our phones, etc. So that's what that switch does. And the third switch right here is comms. This activates power for the ham radios. It activates power for the stereo. But essentially, while you're parked, key out, you can flip the switch and things will come to life. So you can see the booting up there, including the iPad. So while we're sitting here for demonstration purposes, very easy for me to power it up, not have to have the key in, etc. Great for base camp operations. And as you may remember, this Land Cruiser does have a dual battery system in it, which we have an IBS controller down below. And you can see I probably need to put this thing on the charger. She's been sitting for a while. I'll kind of come back to underneath in just a moment. But I want to talk about the dual radio setup real quick, and then we'll jump into the iPad. So one of the beautiful things about having the dual radios is I can monitor 4 channels or 4 frequencies at once. When you're doing operations where you've got, I've taken 10 vehicles with me on a trip to Moab. We did about 15 to Bodie out in the Eastern Sierras. We've done Death Valley runs. So whenever you have multiple vehicles out there, we're using ham radio frequencies for comms. We're all licensed, of course. And so generally what I'll have is one trail frequency and one backup or channel 2 or frequency 2 to run the comms on over the trip. But it's nice to be able to dial in on another radio some sort of the wide area types of things. So for example, if we wanted to listen to simplex communications for say the national frequency that's generally recognized 146.520, we could use this other radio up here, the FTM-350, to be able to do that. And you'll see as I'm scrolling through, a lot of different things are in here, right? I mean, I've got MERS and GMRS frequencies programmed. This is a wideband receive. So I can actually listen to communications from other groups. That's generally what I'm using the top radio for. You'll also see up here, APRS voice activation is what the VA stands for. So I've got an APRS frequency programmed in there. This is an APRS GPS radio, so I can use the auto packet reporting system and be tactical with location, send my location, monitor other locations, and messaging if you're familiar with APRS. So generally I'm running APRS on this side all the time. I'm using this particular radio for monitoring other frequencies, or this other side, excuse me, for monitoring other frequencies while we're on trail or en route. One of the nice things about the 350 is that it has built-in speakers. So I don't have to have an aux speaker. It's got little speakers built into the back, and those are good enough for general monitoring purposes. I was listening to Noah here. Let me turn that up.
Chance of showers for tonight. Southwest winds 10 knots. Chance of showers for Sunday. Southwest winds 10 knots. Slight chance.
So you can get enough volume even with the loud Land Cruiser. So oftentimes, too, you may want to have a quick comm on a frequency with somebody. And I only have one microphone in the cabin. I actually have another one down below in the console for the FTM-350. But a unique piece on the FTM-350 is there's a push to talk button right here and a microphone in the faceplate of this thing. So I can actually have a conversation without having to use a paddle microphone just by hitting the PTT button on the selected frequency. So I've got quick comms that way. But generally the FTM-350 is a situational radio. It also provides various displays for GPS, altitude, clock, compass functionality, speed. So there's some other useful displays built into the 350. So this is definitely my situational radio where I'm using it for those types of activities. My general comms radios happen on the ID5100, the Icom, and the Icom microphone is mounted down below here. So this is a touchscreen radio. As you can tell, I like things with big displays, right? So I can even on the FTM-350, I can even go super large text here, right? So I can toggle back and forth between my bands if I need to. But so this gives me a lot of communication power built in right at my fingertips. One of the things I did to mount these radios here, which was kind of evolved over time, is I used that is a Pro.fit cell phone mount, and normally you'd mount you'd put a bracket on there for a cell phone. So what I did is I used a little piece of a RAM mount. I'm going to swing this around kind of to the side, so bear with me here. But you can kind of see the mounting that I did back there behind, and I'll get a little better picture of that for you. But what I did was I mounted a Simpson strong tie flat piece of steel plate. I got it at Home Depot for $1.25, and I screwed it in or mounted it to that RAM mount. And so I've created a flat mounting surface or flat plate surface. The FTM-350 head's actually 3M VHB double sticky taped onto that steel plate. The ID-5100 actually has a magnetic mount plate that's mounted to it, but you can kind of get an idea of what that plate is. So I created a nice flat surface to mount these heads onto. Now, one of the challenges, of course, is off-road, a lot of vibration, a lot of bouncing, right? So take a look here. I used a Night Eyes Steely. This is actually a cell phone mount, and I'll show you another example. I've got 3 of them in here. But I glued the receptacle piece onto the side of the head, and then this is glued to the dash up here as well. And what this does is it provides that triangulated mount. So this thing is super sturdy. We don't have any vibration issues or any challenges, using the radios while we're on the trail. It worked out very, very nicely. To give you an example of how else I use the Steelies, if you look down here at the microphone, same situation here. So rather than using a basic clip mic or a clip on the microphone or Velcro or any of the other kind of mounting solutions, I like this because it's real easy and fast. You can do it without looking. It just kind of finds and it centers itself, and it's nicely held in place right there. The third place I use the Steely is down below, and I'll get into this, but this is actually just a $50 size Bluetooth remote for really any device, but in this case I'm using it for the iPad. Obviously the controls in the iPad are right there at hand, and it's not a big deal to use them, but it's just a little more convenient using this little disc, and I've got, again, mounted on a Steely. But the nice thing about it is I can take this off of here, walk outside, and and stick this little guy onto the side of the truck. So when we're making a meal or doing anything outside of the truck and I want to control the iPad's music, I can simply undock this thing from the Steely and take it out, and it literally docks on the side of the truck anywhere you want to with its magnetic properties. So that's kind of worked out well. This is also a secondary microphone location, depending on what the situation is, if I want to have the mic down here and run some of the controls easier at hand. But generally speaking, the mic lives up there, and then this guy lives down here for remote purposes. So up here on the iPad, I've got an interesting scenario I'll run you through. So over the years, you know, I immediately took out the stock radio and put in a Pioneer AVIC, fairly top of the line navigation head unit, and it worked fine. But over time, I added, you know, separate power amplifier and speakers and a subwoofer and things, got rid of all the factory components. But I was never happy with the sound quality of the AVIC. It just wasn't that good. And I'd always been running, if you can see some previous videos and photos, I've always been running the iPad up here on top of the dash, which has worked fine, never had issues with it. It was always good. I suppose one of the downsides of being up on the dash was every once in a while you get the sun beating down and it would actually overheat the iPad. It would shut down for a bit. So that was kind of inconvenient from time to time. But the bottom line, which really drove me to put the iPad below, was the sound quality of the AVIC is pretty terrible. So I decided to rip out the AVIC and all of its systems and go straight iPad to power amplifier for the sound. So what I did is I used an iSimple interface adapter on. I can't show you that because it's buried under the dash, but it's basically got a lightning connector that plugs into your iDevice and provides RCA output. And so in order to facilitate RCA output into the power amplifier, I could have gone direct, but I chose to pick up a Clarion equalizer. And this Clarion device is quite interesting. First of all, it sounds really good. It's so surprising. It sounds so good. But it makes it nice for a variety of reasons. One, it has two inputs, so I can actually have a second input switched on just by hitting the switch there on the left. But it has independent volume control and independent subwoofer control, as well as a 7-band EQ and a fader. So it really provides a nice front-end control for the iPad. I set the volume on the EQ at a certain level, and then I use the iPad output adjustment to fine-tune that, so you can have a nice range of iPad audio, and you can equalize it for the interior environment of the truck. So it's worked out very well. So the iSimple interface runs into this EQ. This EQ outputs into a 5-channel ARC audio amplifier under the passenger seat and goes out to the Polk audio and jail audio sub in the truck, and it sounds tremendous. My girlfriend, who's not an audiophile but likes nice stuff, she got in right when I did the change and said, wow, this is really different. It sounds really good. So even a neophyte or somebody that's not an audiophile can tell, you know, it was a big upgrade in terms of sound quality. So, you know, the way the iPad mount, I've used this mounting bracket for years in various states, right? So let me show you what we've got here. So I'm going to take a second here. Sorry for the camera work. I'm using my iPhone today, but I'll edit through this. So basically what we've got here is a mounting bracket that's mounted to the dash, and you can see the iSimple interface. I'm going to unplug it, and let's take a look at what we have. So we're simply here's our power charging and audio cable, the lightning connector. And then we've got the bracket back here on the dash. Now you see 4 bolts in there. So what I did is I took a very simple case that's made by OtterBox. This is their Defender series. And the Defender series cases have a hard shell cover that fits over the front of the iPad. As you can see, here's the iPad, and it's got a rubber membrane case, and then it has the bracket, or I call it it's really kind of a stand, right? So this thing fits over the front of the iPad, but it also has a tilt-up stand, so you can put the iPad in it. You could lean it up if you wanted to at an angle. You can see it's at a bit of an angle there. You could even go with a steeper angle if you wanted to reverse this thing. And I've used these cases for years. This case is 4 years old. 3 years old? When did the iPad mini come out? Anyway, whenever it came out, I got this case. So it's a beautiful little case. It really protects the iPad. But the beauty about this cover is that it also fits over the back of the iPad and holds it in securely. So you see where I'm going with this. I used to have this thing on a double sticky dash mount. It used to sit way up here. And it worked great, and I could see over it. I'm tall. I'm 6'4", wasn't a problem. But when I decided to pull out the Pioneer and go audio only, I decided it was time to incorporate this thing more into the dash. So I have a few of the cover plates that I've acquired over the years. And so you can see what it was to what it is. And so those 4 bolts that you see back here, I simply did a sandwich in the dash. So I used another piece of steel. This is another Simpson strong tie right here. And I essentially created a bracket by sandwiching. So I have this on the inside. I've got the strong tie here on the inside of the dash, and then this bolts through into the strong tie. So it's really just sandwiched right there on the dash. I used some other sticky and supporting glue in there to kind of keep it from moving around. It's uber solid. It's not going anywhere. So essentially, with the strong tie and the back of the OtterBox hard plastic case, I created a dash mount, and it's holding the iPad up there very, very well, and no issues whatsoever. So easy enough to do. There's a lot of ways you could put an iPad up here. Now, I do want to point out that I'm covering the temp display, the security display, and the antenna, the power antenna button. But guess what? I don't need the power antenna button because I don't have a radio in here anymore. I'm not an AM FM kind of guy, particularly. So that's not a big deal to me. And in fact, if I do want AM and FM, the Yeasu FTM-350 has AM and FM built into it. So if I needed to listen to a broadcast for some reason, even like a sports scenario, I can run it right through one of the input sides, or excuse me, one of the channel sides of the FTM-350. I'm using the wrong vernacular right there. Apologize, but you get my point. So anyway, back to the mounting. This is very, very simple to do. Easy enough. Sandwiches right in. One of the other downsides is it ledges over the AC and the interior-exterior airflow controls. Makes them hard to see. You know where they are by feel, but you can't see the indicator light. So that's a tad bit of a pain in the ass. I'm working through that. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to make that work better. I may do something around that. I just haven't decided what I want to do. I may put a separate indicator light somewhere. Believe it or not, it'd be pretty easy to do. It's not super terrible when the iPad's not in the dash, but I run with the iPad there all the time, so it pretty much obfuscates the view of those switches, right? So we can see them here as soon as the iPad goes in. So, buyer beware on that situation. Okay, now you can see I've got the iPad mounted up in there, and I've got it plugged back into the iSimple connector. I'm using, again, this remote below, but now you can see I can control the audio. Start and stop. I can control, next track. It's a nice little remote. You get the idea. This app, by the way, is called DECK, D-E-C-K. So it's just an audio player app for the iPad or iDevice. So I generally have organized the iPad apps the way I would use them, on the road. Yes, text messaging. You can FaceTime. You can, set up, in my case, Find My Friends with my girlfriend, so we know each other might be located. Of course, clock functionalities. I could check email if I wanted to. One of the nice things about this is, custom configuring these things. So for GPS, with the Pioneer, you're stuck with one GPS app. With an iPad, you can have many apps, and they can all run at the same time. So MotionX, generally my off-road preferred nav system, but it makes it very nice to have that at your fingertips. You can cache all the maps that you want to. Additionally, you've got Waze, you've got Google Maps or Apple Maps, and I also tend to use some of the PDF maps from time to time. Just because I like to have some backup stuff. And some of the national parks, et cetera, also produce some PDF maps, so great to have that functionality, right at your fingertips. Some of the other, I'm not going to go down every feature in here, but some of the great features about having this as your head unit, so to speak, is, things like weather and all those kinds of things. Now, I have a data plan on this, so all of these features and functions are available, anytime that you have data available. Obviously, if you're in the middle of nowhere with no data, you're not going to get, weather report updates on it. You're not going to stream music from Pandora, et cetera, et cetera. But while you're on the road and generally operating in the Land Cruiser, you've got all those features available. So anyway, I just want to give you that quick overview. I hope some of these ideas help you out in terms of what you're doing in your cruiser or off-road vehicle. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'll put a couple links to some interesting wiring projects, as well as some of the components and so forth that I happen to be using. Thanks. Talk to you soon.